Project Management for the Masses podcast, episode 22. Starting your own PM business with Francis Hooke.
Project managers, have you ever felt like you should get that promotion or a better job? Start a business. Write that book. Have you ever felt you were made for more but didn't know where to start?
Welcome to the PM for the Masses podcast with your host, Caesar Abaid.
Learn from the experts. Think outside the box. Have a voice, network, and be extraordinary.
PM for the Masses podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the Project Management for the Masses podcast. My name is Caesar Abaid, your host, and this is the podcast about project management by project managers. Whether you're starting out or if you're a seasoned project manager, my goal here is to educate, entertain, and inspire you to take things up a notch in all aspects of your life. And as you can tell by the better sound quality, I'm back on my studio for this week. I kicked my mother-in-law out of the guest room here so I could get to the microphone and bring you this episode in better quality. So today I have my new buddy, Francis Hooke. He's a great guy who did just what I just said there in terms of taking up things up a notch. He did that big time. And I'll explain that to you later. Basically, he left his job to start his own business as a project manager. And it's a bit of a longer interview, so let's get right to it.
Special guest coming up next. PMforthemasses.com. PMforthemasses.com.
Francis Hooke is the founder, owner, and managing director of Quality Project Delivery Limited. He registered the company in July of this year, 2013. Francis has spent a decade working in financial services and technology. He has successfully project managed in some of the highest profile change programs in the investment bank, including the largest financial services merger in history, and we'll talk about that during our conversation here. His experience comes from one of the most rapidly changing industry sectors and an organization with particularly high levels of political complexity. Francis is also a full member of the Association for Project Management, and he holds the Prince 2 certification. And Francis is on the line with me today from just outside London, the UK. Good afternoon, Francis. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Caesar.
So I guess we should disclose that this is we're starting this conversation again because my recorder just crashed. This kind of stuff doesn't happen. It's just because my studio is a little bit messed up. Actually, I came to sit down here to start a conversation, and all my sliders were up. My son had been in here, and he messed around with my equipment. So, and things are a little bit out of control. And we're good. I don't know, 5 or 6 minutes into the interview, and we have to start over. But I appreciate your patience.
It was really good stuff as well.
I know, and it's all gone now forever. Now, Francis, for those listening right now who don't know who you are, you right now, I guess we've known each other for a few months since I started my podcast, and you have a blog and you have a company, and you write really, really good stuff, and you are a fantastic member of my PM for the Masses Google Plus community, and also you have your own LinkedIn group. And the contribution that you give to the project management community out there is really fantastic. And just a few months ago, I didn't even know who you were. So, but what you're doing is really great. So I appreciate you taking the time to be here today and talk to me about starting your own business and your career. Thank you.
You're very welcome, Caesar, and you are one of the most flattering people I've ever met.
Hey, it gets me places.
That's all right. I hope everybody out there gets some benefit out of this today.
Yeah, I'm sure they will. And this is a great follow-up on my last conversation with Farnoosh Brock. She's a consultant, and she helps people make the transition from the corporate mentality and employee mentality into going out and venturing on your own. So this is a perfect example of someone who did that, and apparently is doing that really successfully. So, Francis, so I guess to get started, how about you give us a little bit of an overview of your career? You're a fairly young guy. I had no idea. I thought you were a bit older than me, but it turns out I'm older than you. I don't know why I got that idea. Maybe from your picture, you got a bit of gray hair there.
I have, yeah.
Yeah, and and that's not the case in my family. My dad is 63 and he's just now getting gray hair, so I think I'll be looking. My hair is going to be black for a long time. But anyway, that's beside the point. So Francis, tell us a little bit about your career and how you got started, and maybe take us right to the point where you decided that maybe going out and starting your company would be a good move.
Yeah, sure, Caesar. So I'm just to kind of allude to Caesar's point. I'm 33. So it feels kind of old to me, but apparently some people think I'm still fairly young. I've been working sort of since university, working for about 10 years, and I never ever set out to be a project manager. When I was a little kid, I actually wanted to be a truck driver because I really liked big trucks. But finished university, always had a bit of a kind of logical, mathematical, business kind of brain. And that led me in the direction of financial services and technology. Did a couple of jobs through various connections, and then ultimately ended up on a graduate intake scheme with a company called the Royal Bank of Scotland. So anyone from the UK or indeed Scotland will be very familiar with RBS. Outside of the UK, certainly parts of Asia will have heard of RBS. North America via the Citizens Bank brand, people will be aware of RBS, and then possibly odd little pockets in Canada perhaps too. But yeah, got involved with that company. Spent pretty much 10 years working my way up through the ranks. Started off as a junior project analyst, and then over the course of the years moved up to become a senior business analyst. Did a couple of line roles, and then moved into becoming a project manager. I did a little bit of test management along the way, and then started getting involved in some increasingly large bits of project work. The sort of first major program I took part in was the ABN AMRO RBS integration. So this was the largest financial services merger in history. What it really entailed was taking the financial transactions from the bank that was being taken over and migrating them onto the bank that we own, which was RBS. So I was involved in project managing in that space. It was a very, very busy, hectic time, very pressurized. Did well, made some good progress, got a heck of a lot of good experience. The kind of experience that you only get when kind of rare events like, huge corporate takeovers like that occur. Did that, came out of it the other side, probably with some grey hair at that stage. And then afterwards, got involved in some other major kind of investment programs. One was re-engineering the finance technology stack from top to bottom. I was involved in delivering the first component of that piece of work. And then latterly, sort of post-financial crisis, a markets control remediation program where we worked on closing control gaps that the regulator, we have a regulator in the UK called the Prudential Regulatory Authority, and they insisted that we had certain changes made to the way that we work to ensure that the company was safe and secure for everybody and the customers and staff alike and shareholders. So really that's been my journey. And then it kind of reached a point where, some things came to a head and I decided that I was going to leave that world behind and set up on my own. In June of this year, I handed in my resignation. From that point onwards, it took me a few months to serve out my notice, and then launched a company called Quality Project Delivery. And now I provide business and project consultancy services to small and medium-sized businesses, charities, and public sector organisations. And I have to admit, I'm having an absolutely great time, and hence I met Caesar.
I can tell by your writing that you really enjoy what you're doing. Now, that's people listening right now. Okay, that story that sounds. You moved up the ranks real quick, and perhaps a combination of your competency and circumstances, which is always the case, right? But then the last 30 seconds there, maybe 20 seconds of your story, I think that's that's where it gets even more interesting is when you said, I decided that, a couple of things came to a head, and then you handed in your resignation and you started your company. And I think a lot of people would like to do that, or they feel like they're cut out for that, but they sometimes they feel trapped, or they're afraid, or they feel that the right circumstances haven't come about yet. So first of all, what made you unhappy with, it seems like you had a good position in a very good company, and a bright future ahead of you there, or maybe in another company. So what made you maybe not so happy, or I don't want to use the word unhappy, but maybe what gave you the itch to maybe leave the corporate world?
Sure. Mm-hmm. Well, I kind of figured that I was about a third of the way through my working life at that stage, and I hadn't really sort of sat down and thought to myself, well, look, where do I want to spend my time? I spent a huge percentage, a really material percentage of your life working. So I kind of thought, well, am I really doing what I wanted to do? As I alluded to, when I was a little kid, I never set out to become a project manager in a bank. And I noticed you use the word successful. I think that's quite a difficult word to use with RBS, as it was bailed out by the taxpayer. But I do take your point that it was a high profile organisation, and I was doing a sort of reasonably responsible job in that. What I kind of found was, I was very keen to try and get promoted. I was very keen to try and continue moving up the organisation, but I found that the organisation was getting increasingly political, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And I kind of found that we were in a... You're really pushing me now, actually. I haven't talked about this very much online. I kind of found that... outcomes that I were hoping for weren't necessarily correlated with putting in hard work and achieving the things that I thought I needed to achieve. So for that reason, I think I lost a bit of motivation, lost a bit of heart with what was going on. And I started to question things, and when you start to question things, you kind of take a step back and you ask yourself, why are you doing certain things? And is this really how you want to spend your life? And for me, when I did that process of looking and thinking and kind of weighing up the pros and cons, the honest answer was actually, I think there's more to life than doing this kind of stuff. And that sort of set off quite a quick chain reaction in me. And I have to say, I think there's a bit of a word of warning that needs to come in here. In preparation for today's conversation, I did listen to Farnoosh speaking on your 20th podcast, and it was a really interesting to hear her views, and it kind of was pretty similar to the experience I had. I guess I was in a position where I was kind of financially independent, right? I didn't have I don't actually have any kids at this stage. I didn't have a big mortgage that I was trying to cover. I had a decent amount of cash in the bank. So I was in a situation where I pretty quickly made the decision I wanted to resign. I talked about it with my wife, and she was supportive. And very soon after that, I decided to hand in my resignation. I would say I think Farnoosh gave some absolutely excellent advice on the podcast last time around, which was to say that she said, test it out first, dip your toe in the water before you make any big rash decisions. These are important things. You can't kind of... It is difficult to turn the clock back if you decide you made the wrong decision. So I think Farnoosh's suggestion to test it out in a small way, see whether it fits for you, is most definitely the right thing to do. If you have got a big financial cushion or whatever, then, perfect, go for it. But I fully recognise that not everybody's going to be in that kind of situation. Ultimately for me it was a case of stepping back, taking a long hard look, and quite sort of to my surprise, it sort of popped up, and I kind of realised, well, actually there is more to life than doing this kind of stuff. I want to do something independent. I want to be the master of my own destiny. I think there is a more interesting way to live your life than how I was living at that stage.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And you mentioned that you didn't want to be a project manager was not something that you wanted to be when you were growing up, and I don't think it's anybody's dream. My son wants to be a fireman, and
perfect.
And if you ask children, they will say fireman, or growing up in Brazil, everybody wants to be a soccer player, or football player, and or let's say. A doctor, or I always try to think, okay, what's the pattern? The pattern that I see is threefold. Is number one, we have an innate desire to help people. Number two, we have a desire to for excitement, and number three is we have a desire to make a difference and sometimes be the hero. And it doesn't necessarily, being depending on where you work and what kind of work you do, it's rare that you can get all those three things, But would you say that since you started your business, are you having some of those experiences of helping people, or and making a difference and having some excitement along the way?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's an important way to look at it. When you characterize project managers as people who want to make a difference, who want to help people, I kind of have a little picture in my mind that I think of. When you work in a company, right, that company's got to pay you a salary. There's a cost to you being there, and then obviously through you being in that company, you do work, right? And if you're a project manager, you manage projects, and ultimately that work that you do for the company to be successful, that work that you do has got to be worth more than what you're being paid, right? So in other words, you as an employee cover the cost of you being there. And the net result is that if there's a big difference between what you cost and what benefit you bring, then you're a person who's making a good, profitable contribution to the company. The converse situation is where you cost the company more than what you're contributing, and the net result is that you're being carried by other people in the company if the company itself is to remain profitable. I think when you get into really large corporates, you're in a situation, or any kind of large organisation, people can find themselves a long way from the customer, a long way from the coalface, and that sort of equation of am I really adding value to all of this sort of stuff starts to get a lot harder to understand. And for me now, working in a tiny business, literally just myself at this stage, hopefully it will grow in due course in the future, but just kind of working for myself, I'm acutely aware of how much money I charge clients and how much benefit I bring. So if a client spends, let's say, for argument's sake, £500 on me, I have got to make their business better by at least £500. Otherwise, I've failed, right? I'm actually costing them more money than what it costs, than what benefit I'm bringing to them. They'd been better off leaving that £500 in the bank or going and spending it on something else. So I'm acutely aware of what I cost and how much benefit I bring. And for that reason, I can make some really confident arguments to my clients and say, look, this is what we've spent our time doing. This is what it's cost you. And look, this is how much better we've made your business. If you spent £500 on me and, we've improved your business by £600, you're £100 better off as a result of us working together. And I think, you can't argue with that argument. It's just kind of an indisputable fact of the way that businesses work. And I love the fact that I'm so close to that equation. Back in the old corporate days, it was really, really hard to do that kind of equation about what you're doing, and even large projects in organisations can be loss making. Any project work, it's got a certain budget and it's got to deliver more benefit than what it actually costs to run it. Otherwise, the company just shouldn't run the project in the first place. And it's in large corporates. I think that message often gets forgotten, or that principle often gets forgotten. You can have situations where projects that really, really shouldn't be run do go ahead and get run. I mean, similarly in the public sector. I mean, we're in the UK. There's a big question at the moment about building a new train line between London and Birmingham, halfway up the country. It is going to cost billions and billions of pounds. but the revenue side is unclear. Like, what's the benefit? Well, it's going to shave half an hour off the journey time from one part of the country to another for, those few people who actually travel on it. Yeah, it's going to cost billions. I think we've got to be really, really conscious on what value we're adding and run that simple little equation to kind of work it out. And I think that's the beauty of small business, is that you get that. And I think, Caesar, if I'm not mistaken, you work for a family company, right?
That's right. Yeah, I can.
So I guess probably you and your dad are very, very conscious of, your costs when you work with clients, how much you charge them, and then making sure that you do definitely deliver a good job for them so that there is a positive return in that business.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it helps. There is a principle, and I'm going to put a link to I'm sure there's a Wikipedia entry to this. The principle called subsidiarity in philosophy, that problems are better solved at the lowest possible level. And it's so true when you have a small business, because you see the problem and you're close to it, and anything you do makes a big difference. Either in a positive way or a negative way. And we were talking about it's Sunday and we're both kind of working, right? and I can't really, there's all sorts of labor laws and things like that, but that give me the right to take 2 days off every week. But the truth is, I could do that, but then my business would suffer and my clients would suffer as well. And I choose not to, and I think that's true freedom, I guess, when
what I think actually, Stacey, you made a really interesting point there about the kind of labour laws, and the fact that you and I, right? So I'm sat just north of London, you're in Canada, and we're busy chatting away on a Sunday night. And one hopes that through doing this podcast, I get a little bit of decent PR, you get to grow your user numbers, hopefully make a bit of cash. We think we're getting a positive return on it, right? We are getting into the world has become remarkably connected, and we work on a much more global basis now than even 5 and 10 years ago. We'd have never been doing this sort of stuff. That process is only going to continue, right? So businesses like mine, businesses like yours, we are now competing on a global basis, and emerging economies like China and South America are fielding some really hard-working, very professional, very well-qualified people. And they're going to come up because they're going to be able to, deliver a service at a lower cost, probably, to whatever client they end up working at, and ultimately delivering a better service than or a lower cost service than perhaps you and I can deliver, right? So we're now in this situation where we're facing real global competition, and everybody globally has got to raise their game to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how the big corporations will adapt to this, if they will adapt at all, or they'll have to keep getting bailed out by.
Yeah, well, you know what? I mean, I really take your point there, because I'm working now with some young up and coming businesses in an area in London that's called Silicon Roundabout. I mean, it's a bit of a play on words from Silicon Valley from the US. There are young technology startup companies there, and having come out of corporate world and now starting to spend time with those young companies, the level of enthusiasm, the level of creativity is far, far higher than what I've seen in the old corporate world. I mean, we were very good at talking the talk in the corporate world about, adding value, client focus, what's the business case for this, minimizing costs, blah, blah, blah. Whereas we weren't so good at actually talking the talk, and hence, ultimately the company that I work for had to get bailed out alongside, a bunch of others, and we all know about the global financial crisis. But in contrast, I'm now working with these sort of young up-and-coming companies that are so cost-focused. They are really taking advantage of technology, hugely sort of connected, and they're going to take business away from these large corporates. I mean, it's inevitable, right? It's the rules of economics. It's going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. And as an outsider, I was never a big part of a big corporation. I did my internship for a big company here in Toronto, but my entire professional life has been with a small business, and I attend conferences and webinars and things like that, where big companies will do these talks about adding value and customer focusing on the customer. And to me, it just sounds like it's so common sense. And when you have your business, when you're working with a client, you don't even think about those things. It's a given, right? You need to add value, otherwise they won't hire you again. Or you need to focus on them, or sitting in a meeting and you can see by their body language whether or not they're getting what they're paying for. But I guess when it's a big company, then you kind of lose that touch, and you need to have these talks on to remind yourselves who you work for.
I think that's absolutely fair comment. I mean, when it's really difficult, right? Because large companies are doing very complicated things, and they're serving very large numbers of people.
Right.
For people like in small businesses like you and I, we have got that we're just operating on a far smaller scale, and we're doing something far, far simpler. So that is why we can get that much closer to the clients. So it is a different challenge to sort of be fair to the large corporates.
Right.
You also, as a project manager operating in the corporate space, you can end up several degrees removed from the customers who might ultimately be using or on the receiving end of, some technology that you guys are implementing. And that's why, this message about customer focus and all the rest of it comes in. And sometimes you can be in a situation where you go through your entire career and you never even meet a customer. So it's quite difficult to know what customer focus is. I mean, with the business that I've been doing, I've had to learn how to sell stuff for the first time in my life. And it's a whole new set of skills that I've never had to have before. And I'm really now having to walk the talk about customer focus and adding value and all that sort of stuff. So, we just sort of bring it back a little bit in terms of, what you get out of starting up and doing things on your own is you get right back to the basics of how business works. And you have to, you put it all on the line, right? You have to make sure that you are doing a good job. As you just said, Caesar, you don't get hired again. If you do a crap job, no one's going to hire you again.
Right. So let's say now there is 100 people listening right now, and they're, as I always say, they're nodding their heads as they're driving down the highway, agreeing with us, and wishing that they could do something similar. When you make the decision that you'd like to leave a company and start out on your own, let's talk about your exampling specifics, because it's really real. Did you have already work lined up?
No, in a word.
Okay.
And that's an interesting question, because it's something that I worried about most. I was very conscious that I was going from a reasonable sized paycheck each month that always arrived. I had very few concerns I was going to get laid off. Even though layoffs are happening, good people are happening at that stage. Fortunately, it hadn't happened to me. And I was handing all that in effectively, or turning my back on that to say, no, I'm going to, put myself and my services out there and persuade other small businesses to put their hand in their pocket and give me money for the advice that I can give them. Now, it's one of them things that it is always there in the back of my mind. And until, my business gets to a point where it's established enough that perhaps I don't need to worry about that so much, it's always there. But I think that's a kind of healthy pressure. It is. Has it kept me awake at night? Maybe on odd occasions. Yeah, it has. It has kept me thinking about it. But it most definitely keeps you on your toes, and it's provided me with a great deal of focus to sort of think. How am I? Of all the activities that I'm doing, is this something that's really going to help me get income? We've talked about social media, and obviously that's how you and I met, Caesar. Social media, you can just you can literally pump your entire life into, right? And it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to earn any money. So I think you've got to be really selective about what you do and ask yourself very carefully, is this absolutely going to help me get some income? Is this the best way I can spend my time in order to generate income? Of course, you can do stuff for fun and all the rest of it, but if your livelihood depends on it, you've got to be really, really focused and really selective about what you spend your time doing. So to answer your question, Stephen, no, I didn't have clients lined up. I've kind of used network. Well, no, there's no kind of about it. I have used networks. I have used members of my family. I have asked who needs work done. I have done a few gigs for free. And through that process, I've been able to refine my service, and I think I've got a nice consultancy model worked out now, so people can see that on my website. There's no rocket science behind it; it's just kind of good common business sense. And I'm not big enough that I'm worried about anybody ripping it off yet. So it's all there, all nice and transparent, and I know it works because I've used it with a number of people and tested it out and refined it, and I've got a much clearer idea in my head now about what I do and how I add value. So yes, it's a concern. So actually, to answer your question completely, no, I didn't have any work lined up when I left. Yes, I was nervous about it. I got round that by networking, by being clear on what value I can add and why people should spend money with me. And ultimately, I've got to a stage where I think I've got a very, very competitively priced offering. I think it's a lot better than what is out there today. And I've worked with a number of clients now, and we've actually got some really brilliant results from what we've done. So I actually have confidence behind it. So it's now, I think, a case of just continuing to network, continuing to find more people, publishing the success stories so people know, if they spend £100 on me, they're going to get £110 back in benefit. So I think that's where I am on the journey, and I think it's just gonna continue like that.
Mm-hmm. And I'm going to ask you about quality project delivery, which is the name of your company, in a minute. But your spouse, your wife, when you came home and say, "I think I'm going to quit my job and I don't have anything else," lined up. How was that? Did you get support right away? I think that's something that would concern me, and I'm sure there are people listening right now who would see that as an obstacle as well. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, definitely. You know what? It's going to vary, right, from one person to the next. One end of the spectrum, you might have, let's say, a single person who, doesn't have a mortgage, doesn't have any kids. Worst came to the worst, they could always move back with their parents, right? The risks for them, and they might say they've got cash in the bank as well, right? The risks for them, the downside for them, are very, very low. At the other end of the spectrum, if you've got somebody who's got, a number of children, who's got a wife who's at home looking after them, might have a big mortgage, might have some other financial commitments and so forth, and very little financial cushion, stepping away from that is going to be a much, much riskier venture. So it's going to vary, I think, is the first point I'm going to say there. I was towards the kind of former end of the spectrum, as far as I did have a number of years worth of basically financial contingency. So for that reason, it was a relatively low risk venture. Of course, there was a big opportunity cost by walking away from a regular paycheck. But the way that we looked at it was not just from a financial point of view. We looked at it from a sort of a more holistic life perspective. And this is perhaps where we start to touch on some of the stuff that Farnoosh was saying to you a couple of podcasts ago. I was in a situation where I was not as fit and healthy as I used to be, shall we say. I was in a position where I wasn't particularly happy. I was when I actually stood back and look at it, I kind of felt that I wasn't giving my wife as much time as she perhaps deserved. And that's something really important. That's and I imagine a sort of similar thing is true for people who have kids. You've got these really important relationships in your life, yet you put the answering the BlackBerry before that, or getting up at a certain time and being completely bollocks come the weekend, so that you're no use to anybody. And there was an element in my mind where I sort of thought to myself, look, if I carry on like this, at some stage in the future, it could well cost me my marriage. And I thought that's just completely ridiculous situation. And, when you factor all those sort of bits in, it kind of builds up a bit of a picture. And, I went through this list with Donna, all the sort of reasons to leave, reasons to stay, and weighed it up. And, we made a kind of a joint decision that this was probably the right way to go. So in the same way as, project managers out there would go about dealing with their stakeholders at work, if you've got a wife or a husband at home, they're kind of a stakeholder in this process too. And,
right.
The level of risk is going to vary from one person to the next. So I think it's a question of putting together that picture and that holistic picture and kind of coming up with, what you think the right thing to do is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Stakeholder management. Just make sure that she's a part of the decision making, and that I agree, absolutely agree, because it's not worth it if you might be pursuing your dream, but you're gonna lose your marriage or your relationship with your kids are gonna be affected. Then it might not be worth it.
The one caveat I'd add to that is I've not been in a position yet where I've not been able to have something I particularly wanted, right? So, there may come a point in time where I can't afford a fancy foreign holiday or something else that I might like, and then I'll probably be a bit angry and be kicking myself. But who knows? Who knows?
Yeah. But in the end, you mentioned opportunity cost. There is always a drawback, and you just need to make sure that it's worth it. An example I give here is when we kind of made the decision that Amy, my wife, would stay home with the kids, and our income just got dropped in half, and it was a decision that we made, and our lifestyle completely changed, and we couldn't do things that we were used to doing, but the benefits far outweigh that. So it's you need to weigh those things and just be intentional, I guess is the word. Just don't go through life following the wind, but just be in charge and be intentional about your decisions and what you do, and be willing to accept the consequences.
I agree with that, right? Because one of the things I found a little bit weird is reflecting back on corporate life. Is you're in a situation where you pump all these hours and all this effort and all this kind of emotional commitment into an organization, and yet somebody else is really in charge of your own destiny. Somebody sat in an office somewhere, decides how much you're going to get paid, what your bonus is, all these other things about you, and if you're someone who's really into, corporate life and all the rest of it, and you see yourself defined by, your salary, your title, your qualifications, all that sort of stuff, that's very much kind of outside of your control. You can kind of influence it, but ultimately somebody else decides all that stuff for you. And it's like, I know your strap line is life as a project and you're the manager. Again, if you take that mentality, you looking at your own life and corporate life, you can sort of say, well, actually, I'm running a massive dependency here on somebody else and what they think of me to, control what I get paid, how my title, my this, that, and the other, my promotion prospects. Whereas if you go and do stuff on your own, or set something up on your own, you're entirely in charge of your own destiny. Yeah, you're at the mercy of the market and kind of what you can persuade people. But then that's all about you and whether you're doing a good job. And I think the need is out there. If you've got a product or a service or whatever and you do a good enough job, people will spend money on it because it will be better than the competition. I think for me it was really, really appealing being in charge of my own destiny, and there's been other factors as well, like the fact that I've lost about 8 kilograms in weight, and I think my job is a damn sight more interesting now than it used to be. I'm meeting all kinds of new people. I'm traveling all over the place. It's a really good, interesting adventure. Hopefully one day, the financial side of it will catch up and overtake, where it was in corporate world. But, I'd just say to people out there, if you are in working hard in corporate land, investing a lot of kind of effort and emotion into that, look at it and think about it like a project and just ask, are you really in charge of this? Are you in control of this? Or is somebody else in charge of it and control of it? And if so, in that case, are you running a massive dependency that you don't really have control over?
Mm-hmm. And you were smart enough to understand that and come up with a contingency plan, and you treat it as a risk, I guess. And so when you made the decision that you didn't want that dependency anymore, you you were equipped to make that decision with a sober mind and with your feet on the ground. So very good. Kudos. Now, let's talk about your company then, and a couple things. So can you explain to us what it is that your company does, and how do you, and this is something that people will be very interested in as well, is how do you mentioned that you help small businesses. How do you explain and let's say sell project management to small businesses?
Sure. Okay, so in terms of what I do, I am a consultant. I'm a business and project consultant. So what I bring is really three things. If you've got a business that is operating, my argument to them is, well, actually, there are probably things that we could do to make your business better. Or if you've got a particular challenge that you're facing, there's ways in which we can structure that and I help you overcome that challenge. And I bring three things really. Firstly, I bring a certain level of expertise. So, the work that I've done in the past, I've know a reasonable amount. I'm not, of course, there are people out there that know way, way more than me, all right? But I know I have a certain working level knowledge of project management and some good business practices, and I bring that together and I apply it in a certain way. So that's the sort of first bit of value that I add. The second bit of value that I add is an external perspective. When you're working in a situation, often, especially if you're kind of emotionally involved in it, it's very, very difficult to take a step back and really see the wood through the trees. And that's not a failing on anybody's part. That's just the nature of being a human being. If you get very wrapped up and very, very involved in something, it's just inherently difficult to take a step back. As a consultant, I come in with that external perspective, so I can point things out that people might not necessarily be able to see. I also have the experience of working in many different organisations, so I can see generally what the market looks like, generally how things are done in a certain way. So I can kind of hold up a mirror to a small business and say, well, look, this is what you're doing, and this is kind of how it compares to other people doing similar stuff in your market. So it really allows people to get that kind of 360-degree view on what they're doing. And then finally, the last bit is the last kind of bit, or perhaps skill, I think, that makes it possible, is people skills. You can have all of the expertise and knowledge and all the rest in the world, and if you can't work with people and build relationships, I don't think this is the right way to go for you. I think many of us will have had the experience of incredibly well-educated university professors who really struggle to explain ideas to an audience of students. It's quite painful when you can be on the receiving end of that and you've somehow got to get it in your head and get through an exam. So the ability to communicate ideas in a simple way that makes sense to people in their own language, I think is absolutely essential. And, hopefully I'm showing a little bit of that off with some of the ideas I'm sharing here today. So I think really those are the three things that I do. And the net result is that when I work with companies, of course I charge them. And let's say for argument's sake, I charge them £100. My argument is that by working together, we can make your business at least £100 better. And we do that through a mixture of expertise, external perspective, and then the relationship skills that I can bring to help us work well together.
Mm-hmm. Very good. And so when you approach businesses, to try and work with them, is this the kind of conversations that you have, or how does that work?
A lot of it is through networking. I've not had, in fact, actually, I've had zero work come cold, if you like, cold calling or someone see my website and picked up the phone. It's all been through relationships and people kind of opening doors and stuff like that. And I've got a feeling that's probably where 90-95% of my work will come from, and it might be odd bits externally, sort of cold calling or whatever in the future. But really, one of the most interesting clients I'm working with at the moment. One of the guys on that team is friends with my brother. And, when I was out having, dinner with my brother a little while ago, I got chatting to him about what his friends are up to and all the rest of it. That led from one connection to the next. I got in touch with this guy in this company. excuse me, and then he referred me on to the managing director of the company, and I got in touch and we had a conversation, explain what I do. If people want to read about selling, a good book to have a look at is Spin Selling. I can't remember exactly who it's by, but that's the kind of principle that you use. You basically go and you talk to them about the problems that they're facing, and then hopefully you kind of find, well, actually, yes, you've got problems, and I've got a certain level of expertise and skills that can help you solve that problem. And if we work together, we can deal with it and make you, a more successful organisation. And so, rationally, people will get that. If you can say to somebody, well, look, you've got this problem, and I can help you overcome it. And I can do it at a price that makes sense given the scale of the problem, then people will go with it.
Mm-hmm. Very good. And I will have a link to your company's website and the other things that you mentioned here on the show notes for this episode. Now, I usually ask my guests, especially the project manager ones, the PM for the Masses 5 questions, and I think I'm going to tweak it a little bit today because we covered a lot of it during the during the interview already. But so let's talk about this real quick before we wrap up here. We're kind of running late, but it's a great conversation. So I had to kind of put my host hat on and kind of be respectful about other people's time as well. Let's talk about your blog. Okay, how do you see your blog and as part of your efforts to promote your business and to contribute to the industry? How do you see your blog there, and what do you expect to gain from it?
Well, I think the blog is basically marketing. I think it's all really blunt about it. Mm-hmm. But I think marketing is changing compared to what it used to be. Like marketing in years gone by used to be about, look, we have this product, this service, it's wonderful, and here's the reasons why, and here's a lovely picture to go with it. I think marketing today is more about sharing information, and I'm very, very transparent about how I work. The process that I use and why it adds value. And yeah, on the one hand, my competitors can come and have a look at that and rip it off if they want. But on the other hand, I'm, if you like, showcasing my knowledge. And by showcasing that knowledge, I'm also sharing it with other people. So by other people listening to this podcast or visiting my blog or whatever, they can pick up stuff that's genuinely useful. And I think, marketing nowadays is about a bit of give and take, right? If I give something useful, then I will get the traffic to sort of justify that. And then amongst that traffic, there might be one or two people that might think, actually, yeah, this guy knows what he's talking about. This is what we need. He could help us solve a problem in our business. So it's it's kind of a symbiotic relationship. I have to give in order to receive. And I think that's very much what a lot of marketing is about today.
Couldn't agree more. Very good. Personal productivity. What is your number one tool or technique that you use to stay on top of things?
I think I touched on it earlier. I think running your own business, you become acutely aware of what you're spending your time doing and how that impacts your bottom line. Prior to that, I used to write lots of lists, right? I'd write lists and then I'll be juggling the priorities on it. But I think, for me, I kind of don't have to try quite so hard on productivity nowadays. I'm not sort of, I've got competing demands, but I just find I've kind of got a good instinct for what's going to add value and what's not. I mean, unfortunately, Caesar, I thought this podcast would probably add value, so hence I'm here today.
I'm honored. Yeah, because I said it was going to take you 30 minutes of your time, and it's 45 right now. So.
Oh, that's all right. Go for it. Don't mind.
Apologize for that. So, okay, very good. So let's talk about networking then. What's the best way you found to network with people?
I think it's about being very genuine. I mean, we've all had the experience of sort of sleazy networking people, and there's no bigger turn off than somebody who's clearly out for what they can get, or sort of falsifying a relationship with you. I think that much like what I was saying with the marketing, right? It's got to be genuine. It's got to be symbiotic. It's got to be a bit of give and take. Like if you look at me and you, Caesar, right? We're in a situation where, I'm giving you content for your podcast. You send your podcast out. You hopefully get some, kickback from that. Equally, I've hopefully shared some useful information here that people can benefit from. So there's been value in them spending their time listening to this. So I think it's just about this sort of continual sharing and with networking. If like you and I, right, we've got a useful relationship, we've got something good out of it. Hopefully, we'll continue to talk, and who knows where it will lead in the future.
Very good. And all right, so let's say for just to wrap things up here, for the project manager who are listening right now, and they'd like to maybe follow in your footsteps and do something similar, maybe quit their job or maybe start a business. What is your number one tip for that person right now who's listening?
For somebody who's thinking about, well, I guess you'd have to be kind of unhappy if you're probably looking at your options. I think do a really rational assessment of, the pros and cons of the two options. If you want to get really scientific about it, look up prioritization matrices on the internet. Don't make any rash decisions. Obviously, if you're in a position where you've got a large financial cushion, great, you've got a lot more flexibility. If you haven't, it's got to be a much more carefully planned exercise, and as Fanush recommended, sort of dipping your toe in the water and testing it out beforehand. So I honestly think is just make a rational decision, look at it holistically, not just the financial side of things, but also things like your health, your relationships, and the stuff that really matters in life.
Awesome. Well, Francis, thank you so much. If people want to learn more about you and your company, where should they go?
They can Google quality project delivery and they'll find me. Or I think, Caesar, on your website, you're going to stick some links up and all the rest of it. And hopefully if people, what I think we're going to try and include is some links to the blogs and links to case studies. So people can go there, have a read of what I've been up to. I hope you pick up some tips. If you've got any comments or questions, I do, I'll reply to those via the internet. So please don't hesitate to get in touch. And as I say, I hope there's something valuable there that you can learn from.
Thanks a lot, Francis. And I'll have all these links on the show notes for episode 22. And you can find that at pmforthemasses.com/22. Francis, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the weekend.
You too, mate. Take care.
You are listening to the PM for the Masses podcast.
All right. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Francis. I sure did. As you can tell, it was a 45-minute long. It was almost 50 minutes long. Actually, we stopped the recorder and we kept on talking. We just had a lot to talk about. So I hope you enjoyed that. And I hope you didn't mind that it was a bit on the longer side. Now, starting your business can be a tricky thing. And there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of variables. There's a lot of feelings involved with that. So it always fascinates me, to learn how people did it and how, how they got their first contracts and how they make that, scary transition sometimes. And every story is different. So we had Farnoosh Rock on the show, and she talked about her experience, and she actually branched out into something else that's not even related directly to project management. While Francis, he's acting out there as a project manager and using the experience that he had in the corporate world and bringing that to the small businesses and basically taking control of his destiny as we talked about in the interview. So very cool things there that he shared with us, and I hope that was at least inspiring to you and maybe give you some ideas on how to take similar steps so you too can start your own business and be more in control of what happens to you as you go forward. Now, maybe you have started a business already. So if you have, I'd love to hear from you. So what was it like, What was it like for you to start it? How is it working for you now? Do you have any advice that you can share with us? For example, what do you know now that you wish you knew then, So if you have anything you'd like to share with us, please go to pmforthemasses.com/22 and leave me a note there, and everybody will be able to see that. So if you go to pmforthemasses.com/22, at the bottom of the post, there is a field there, comment box that you can use to leave me a note there. Just, share some of your thoughts on what went through your mind as you were doing that transition and things like that. Would be great. And really, that's it for the show today. A bit longer show, but this is it. And I'd like to thank a person called D. Valdez from Canada. I don't know, D is just the first name's initial, but D. Valdez from Canada, who left me a lovely review there in iTunes for the PM for the Masses podcast. And, this is still one of the best things you can do to help me and the show. Go to pmforthemasses.com/iTunes, or simply just look for the show in the iTunes catalog and leave me an honest review and rating there. And if you have done that already, I thank you. And I'd like to thank especially Dee Valdez for taking the time to help out the show that way. And again, thanks for listening. I will talk to you next week. And until then, remember that life is a project and you are the manager. Ciao, ciao.
Thank you for listening to the PM for the Masses podcast.
Tune in next week for more great ideas on how to manage your projects better and truly stand out in your industry.
PMforthemasses.com